You ever get that feeling like adulthood is this big, complicated game, but nobody actually gave you the rule book?
Oh, definitely.
Like everyone else just knows how to navigate certain situations and you're just sort of figuring it out.
That rings so true for, well, for so many people, I think.
Yeah.
It's like there's this unwritten manual for being a grown-up.
Yeah.
And most of us are just, hoping we stumble upon the right pages eventually.
Exactly. Well, today we're diving deep into a really fascinating idea that might shed some light on this. We've been digging into this research report about the hidden curriculum of adulthood.
Mhm.
Think of it as all those essential psychological skills and social understandings that are kind of expected of us as adults,
Right.
but we rarely get any formal lessons on them.
And it makes sense, doesn't it? As the report's abstract highlights, that feeling of being constantly behind, that adulting fatigue
Yeah, that fatigue.
so many people experience, it could very well stem from gaps in this unspoken curriculum.
It's like we're all trying to build this amazing adult life, but maybe we're missing some fundamental tools in our mental toolbox.
Exactly. Our mental and social toolbox.
Right, right. Now, the term hidden curriculum, it actually started in education, didn't it?
It did, yeah. Jackson back in '68. The idea that schools teach us more than just, like, math and history.
Stuff like waiting your turn or figuring out the social pecking order.
Precisely. And this report takes that core concept and applies it to our psychological growth once we're sort of out in the real world.
What's really interesting, I thought, is that it moves beyond just the practical stuff, like how to do your taxes or whatever.
Though that's important too.
Oh, for sure. But this focuses more on the inner game, right? The psychological and social intelligence that we're often just assumed to possess.
That's the key. It's assumed.
And that's precisely what we're going to unpack today. We'll explore some of these crucial, often invisible skills. Our mission here is really just to give you some insights and maybe, hopefully, a few of those aha moments.
About making your head spin.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this hidden curriculum. Where should we start? Maybe with how we handle our own emotions.
Sounds like a great place to start. The report emphasizes advanced emotional regulation and distress tolerance.
Okay, sounds fancy.
Well, it goes way beyond just, naming your feelings, like saying, okay, I'm feeling disappointed or I'm mad.
So not just identifying.
No, it's about actively managing how intense those feelings get and how long they stick around, especially the tough ones.
Like disappointment, frustration, envy even.
Yeah, envy, boredom, that sting of rejection, all of those.
It's more like having a sophisticated control panel for your emotions rather than just an on-off switch.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And the report points out that a key part is learning to steer clear of those quick fix, but ultimately kind of unhelpful ways of coping.
Like what?
Well, things like excessive avoidance, just pretending the problem doesn't exist. Or maybe turning to substances or lashing out at people.
Gotcha. The stuff that makes things worse in the long run.
Exactly. And what often remains hidden is just how specific these skills are. We might see how adults around us handle things or, well, don't handle things.
Right? We see the good and bad modeling.
But the actual techniques, things like cognitive reappraisal.
Which is like rethinking the situation.
Yeah, actively reframing it to change your emotional response. Or radical acceptance, learning to accept things as they are, even if they're painful. Or even just healthy self-soothing strategies. These are often only explicitly taught in, say, therapy. Society often just gives us vague advice like, just get over it or be strong.
Which isn't helpful at all. It's like telling someone who's never cooked to just make dinner.
Precisely.
The report is a really good example, actually. Imagine a major project you poured your heart into fails at work. What does navigating that with good emotional regulation actually look like?
Okay, so first it starts with acknowledging the disappointment. You got to let yourself feel that, right?
Yeah.
But then the key is being able to step back, to analyze what went wrong, sort of objectively.
Without beating yourself up?
Exactly. Without immediately resorting to harsh self-criticism or blaming everyone else. It involves managing the anxiety about, the fallout from the failure.
Right.
And crucially, finding that inner drive to learn from it and move forward constructively, rather than just getting bogged down in negativity or dwelling on what ifs.
That makes total sense. And maybe a more everyday example, like how we react when a friend suddenly seems a bit distant. less responsive than usual.
Yeah, that's a good one. Someone with good emotional regulation wouldn't automatically jump to the worst-case scenario. Oh, no, they hate me.
Or start sending a million texts demanding reassurance.
Right. They'd be able to manage that uncertainty, observe the situation without letting their own anxiety spiral, and maybe gently inquire later if it feels right.
It's about creating that pause, isn't it? That quote about the space between stimulus and response.
Viktor Frankl, yeah. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response.
That's it.
In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Developing that ability to pause, to not be immediately reactive. That's really the core of advanced emotional regulation.
Okay, so we've looked inward at our emotions, but a huge part of adulthood is, well, dealing with other people. The social world. What's in the HITR curriculum there?
Right. That leads us to what the report calls sophisticated social navigation and nuanced communication.
Okay.
This is all about being able to really read between the lines in social situations. It's picking up on those subtle, unspoken cues.
Like what kind of cues?
A slight shift in someone's tone of voice, a fleeting micro-expression on their face, understanding the often invisible dynamics within a group.
It's like being a social anthropologist all the time, constantly observing, interpreting clues people aren't explicitly stating.
You got it. And the report mentions understanding implicit hierarchies, too.
Those unwritten rules.
Yeah, in any social or work setting. Who holds influence, how decisions really get made, what's acceptable behavior, what's not.
Super important.
It also covers diplomacy and tact, knowing how to deliver difficult news or feedback gently, minimizing defensiveness.
And setting boundaries, that's a big one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Setting boundaries gracefully but firmly, and navigating disagreements constructively, aiming for understanding, not just winning. And a really crucial underpinning here is theory of mind.
Which is basically understanding that other people have their own thoughts and feelings different from yours.
Exactly. Their own perspectives, knowledge, intentions. It sounds simple, but really internalizing it is key.
And this feels so hidden because so much of it is just absorbed through culture, family, observation.
Right. Cultural osmosis is a good term for it. We learn over years, and the feedback we get is often indirect, subtle, maybe even confusing sometimes.
Nobody hands you a step-by-step guide on how to read a room perfectly.
Wouldn't that be nice? Think about a work scenario. A colleague verbally agrees with your idea in a meeting, but you notice a slight hesitation? Their body language is off, or their tone is a bit cool.
Okay, yeah.
Someone with strong social navigation skills senses that mismatch. They'd find a tactful way to gently probe, maybe later, to understand the real reservations without making it awkward.
That is such a vital skill, especially at work. And then there's the classic example, declining a social invitation from a friend who's maybe a bit needy.
Right. Without hurting their feelings.
Yeah. It's about saying no in a way that respects them and preserves the friendship, but still protects your own time and energy.
That's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And the report rightly points out that navigating office politics effectively, that relies almost entirely on this hidden skill set.
Totally. You can't just rely on the official org chart.
And that George Bernard Shaw quote really hits it. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Ah, so true.
We think we've been clear, but this hidden curriculum is about bridging that gap between our words and their actual understanding.
Okay, so internal emotions, external social stuff. Now, what about dealing with systems, the big faceless ones we all have to interact with, like bureaucracy?
Yes. That falls under navigating bureaucracy and systems psychologically. This is about keeping your cool, basically. Maintaining persistence and emotional equilibrium when you're dealing with these often impersonal, often frustrating systems.
Like healthcare providers, government agencies, big companies.
Exactly. They all have their own logic, their own rules and procedures, which often don't seem to make much sense from the outside.
It's that moment when you're on hold with customer service for like an hour.
Yes.
Get transferred 5 times and have to patiently explain the same problem over and over again.
Been there. The hidden skill here isn't just knowing which form to fill out or which number to call.
Though that helps.
It definitely helps. But the hidden skill is the psychological stamina. Managing that feeling of helplessness or being bounced around, staying organized, communicating calmly even when you're internally screaming.
Right, because screaming rarely helps.
Almost never. The practical advice, read the fine print. Keep records. That's the explicit part. The hidden curriculum is the emotional resilience needed to actually do those things when the system seems designed to wear you down.
The report's insurance company example is spot on. It's about advocating for yourself effectively without losing it or just giving up.
Because giving up or yelling often just makes it less likely you'll get what you need.
Right. You have to kind of understand their game, even if you don't like it, and manage your own reaction to play it effectively. Okay, shifting gears slightly. Adulthood is also full of uncertainty, isn't it? How does the hidden curriculum help with that?
Good question. That's where managing ambiguity and long-term perspective comes in.
Okay.
This is the ability to tolerate not knowing exactly what the future holds, your career, relationships, life in general, without becoming completely paralyzed by anxiety.
Without shutting down.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about being able to make decisions even with incomplete information, being flexible when things inevitably change.
And delayed gratification. That seems huge here.
Absolutely. Our culture often pushes instant results, right? So the ability to work towards long-term goals, even when progress isn't immediate or obvious, that feels almost countercultural sometimes.
It really does.
And that's a big reason it often feels hidden. We aren't explicitly taught how to sit with that discomfort of uncertainty, how to trust a process that might take months, years.
Like what kind of process?
Well, mastering a new skill, saving for retirement decades away, nurturing a deep relationship through the rough patches.
Uh-huh.
The report gives the example of committing to years of study for a career where there's no guaranteed job at the end. That takes serious capacity to manage ambiguity and stay focused long-term.
Or sticking with the relationship through tough times, knowing growth comes from navigating challenges, not just smooth sailing.
Yes. Or even making those boring financial plans for retirement. It requires keeping a distant goal in mind despite present uncertainties.
Makes sense.
And the report briefly links this to ego development theories. The idea that as we mature psychologically, we generally get better at handling complexity and ambiguity.
But it's not automatic.
Not at all. It's very much part of this learned, often hidden curriculum.
Okay. So manage emotions, navigate social stuff, deal with systems, handle ambiguity. What's the last key unspoken skill the report highlights?
The last one is setting and managing expectations, self and others.
Ah, expectations. That sounds important.
It really is. It's about developing a realistic grasp of what's actually possible. For yourself, your talents, your limits. For other people. For life in general.
So acknowledging limitations.
Yes, yours and others. Being willing to adjust goals when reality bites. Communicating your own expectations clearly, kindly. And crucially, learning how to cope with disappointment when things inevitably don't go exactly as planned.
This feels so relevant today with social media showing everyone's highlight reel.
Oh, absolutely.
It creates this pressure, this illusion of limitless potential, overnight success. It makes accepting our own or others' limitations really hard.
It does. And learning to calibrate those expectations is often a very private, sometimes quite painful process. Nobody explicitly teaches us how to accept that we simply cannot be amazing at everything simultaneously.
Right, yeah.
Or how to make conscious, sometimes difficult, trade-offs with our time and energy.
Yeah, you can't realistically expect to have a killer career, a perfect home, amazing social life, sleep 8 hours, and be a gourmet chef.
Yeah, not all at the same time. To an exceptional degree, no.
Yeah.
Something has to give. Understanding that, making conscious choices within those constraints, that's a huge part of this.
And the flip side, too, understanding that other people aren't mind readers.
Exactly. Partners, colleagues, friends.
Yeah.
We need to actually tell them what we need or expect, clearly and respectfully, not just assume they know.
Or get resentful when they don't guess right.
Precisely. And that Maya Angelou quote the report includes about bitterness.
Bitterness is like cancer.
It eats upon the host. But anger is like fire. It burns it all clean. Once she's talking about anger specifically, it really highlights how those unspoken, unmet expectations can fester.
Turning into that damaging bitterness.
Yeah. So effective expectation management helps us avoid that internal corrosion.
Wow. Okay, so these are really crucial foundational skills. Now, the report also talks about what happens when we don't really develop these skills adequately. What are some of the consequences?
Yeah, unfortunately, the consequences can be pretty significant. They can really impact overall well-being. The report points to things like chronic anxiety and persistent stress.
Makes sense.
If you're constantly struggling to manage emotions, navigate social situations, handle uncertainty without these skills, it naturally creates ongoing unease.
And relationship problems.
Big time. Stemming from poor communication, trouble with boundaries, not knowing how to handle conflict constructively.
Yeah, I can see that. And career-wise, it could hold you back, surely.
Definitely. Career stagnation. If you find it hard to navigate workplace dynamics, handle feedback, bounce back from setbacks, it's much harder to thrive professionally.
Uh-huh.
And the report also mentions those pervasive feelings of inadequacy, imposter syndrome.
That feeling you're just faking it.
Yeah, that nagging sense you're not good enough, that someone will find you out. When you see others seemingly coping better and you feel like you're struggling with these hidden things, it's easy to internalize it as a personal failing.
Which sounds exhausting. Could lead to burnout.
Absolutely. Burnout is mentioned. That feeling of being completely drained from constantly trying to cope without the right tools.
And sadly, I guess some people might turn to less healthy ways of coping.
The report does note that, unfortunately. Things like substance abuse, avoidance, maybe unhealthy relationship patterns, as a way to temporarily numb the distress.
It sounds like a negative feedback loop almost.
It really can be. Lacking the skills makes life harder, which increases stress, leading to unhelpful coping, which then hinders developing the very skills you need.
Oof. So, given how important these skills clearly are, why do they stay so hidden? Why aren't they taught more explicitly?
Well, the report suggests a few reasons. One big one is just how implicit they are. They're woven into culture, family dynamics.
Things you're just supposed to absorb.
Exactly. Through observation, imitation, not direct teaching.
It's like trying to learn a language just by listening, without grammar lessons. You might get by, but you miss a lot of nuance.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And another factor is just the difficulty in codifying these subtle skills. How do you write a manual for reading a room accurately or giving feedback perfectly every time?
Right, it's not like changing a tire. It's context dependent.
Highly context dependent. It's much more complex than teaching a step-by-step process.
It's more about developing intuition, emotional intelligence.
Exactly. And there's also often this societal assumption, isn't there?
Yeah.
That maturity and social skills just happen with age.
Yeah, that by the time you're an adult, you should just know this stuff.
Which, as we've discussed, isn't always the case.
And maybe we focus too much on the external stuff. Grades, job titles.
I think the report makes that point well. We focus on easily measurable achievements, maybe at the expense of cultivating these crucial but less tangible internal competencies.
We spend years on formal education for technical skills.
And often overlook the deliberate development of these inner skills that actually underpin so much of our adult success and well-being.
And maybe it's just uncomfortable to talk about admitting you struggle with this stuff.
Definitely. The report touches on the vulnerability involved. It can feel like admitting a personal failing, both individually and societally.
When really it might just be a gap in what we were taught or what society traditionally valued.
Precisely.
Okay, so bringing it all together, what's the core takeaway from this deep dive into the hidden curriculum?
Well, the central idea, really, is that adulting involves this incredibly complex psychological skill set that's often learned implicitly, if it's learned at all. And simply recognizing that this hidden curriculum exists can be incredibly validating. It can reduce that feeling of personal inadequacy.
Like, okay, it's not just me.
Exactly. Understanding that many common struggles aren't personal failings, but maybe gaps in awareness or instruction in these key areas.
And the really encouraging news, as the report also points out, is that it's not like you're stuck if you missed out, right? There are ways to learn this stuff.
Absolutely. That's crucial. Feels like emotional intelligence training. DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, which has really practical skills.
For emotions, relationships, handling distress.
Yes. And ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy for psychological flexibility. Relationship counseling, even philosophical inquiry. They all offer deliberate pathways to learn and strengthen these skills.
So it's definitely not a case of being doomed if you didn't magically absorb it all. There are concrete resources, proactive approaches.
Totally. It's about making the implicit explicit. Recognizing these inner skills are vital and intentionally seeking ways to develop them throughout our lives.
Well, this has been genuinely enlightening. A really fascinating deep dive into this hidden curriculum of adulthood. It provides such a valuable new lens, I think. So for you, our listener, now that you have a clearer glimpse into this often unseen curriculum, what's one specific area that particularly resonated?
Yeah, what stood out?
What's one aspect of your own psychological or social navigation that maybe you feel inspired to explore further or just pay a bit more conscious attention to?
And maybe thinking about how this understanding, knowing these unspoken rules exist, how might that empower you moving forward?
Yeah. How does knowing the game exists change how you play it? Definitely something worth reflecting on.